Good evening, everyone. I call the May 19th, 2025 regular meeting of the Union County Board of Commissioners to order. At this time, I'd like to recognize Commissioner Balcom for the invocation.
Thank you. If you're so inclined, I invite you to join us in prayer. Dear Heavenly Father, Lord, we just thank you for all your many blessings. We know that every good and perfect gift comes from you. So, Lord, as we bow now, we ask for wisdom and discernment and guidance so we can be good caretakers of the blessings that we have bestowed upon us. We thank you for all your many blessings, and we love you, Lord, and we praise you in Jesus' name. Amen.
Please stand. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. The next item on the agenda is informal comments from the community. Okay, we had two speakers sign up online. We will begin tonight with Martha Grice Haney. She must not be here. We will move now to Kimberly Morrison Hansley.
Good evening. On April the 28th, I sent an email to all of you requesting an opportunity to speak with you with a concern. Ms. Helms, I know you were going through a family emergency, and I hope everything is okay. You were the very first person with all that you were going through to respond, and it is deeply appreciated. Ms. Merrill, I really appreciate you responding as well. Mr. Helms and Mr. Sides and Mr. Balcom, I've yet to hear from either of you. And to be honest, Gary, you were the only one I was surprised I didn't hear from. I thought I would have heard from you. But nevertheless, I come before you again. I've come before you guys a couple of times concerning my internet, which I was able to successfully gain internet without the help of Union County. My other concern has been property that is uninhabited. And I'm being very intentional in saying uninhabited because I've gotten these back and forth emails with Mr. Helms, and I don't think he quite understands what I've been communicating. Property that no one lives in, that is run down, trashed, falling down. I've come and showed you guys pictures year after year after year. I showed you guys pictures of how the whole house was lined, the gables of the house was lined with buzzards. I begged and I pleaded, and I've seen, I think it's over 317 pages of a public records request where I requested where you have taken action on properties that needed to be addressed because of the safety hazards and everything else. So I am not asking you guys to make a decision about how people keep their yards and their houses like an HOA. But I am asking you to understand those of us who pay high property taxes year after year after year and cannot control what our neighbor does, but have some type of standard of housing for a neighbor who no longer even lives in the house. I don't think that's too much to ask. That is somebody that owns that property who is being very negligent and not taking any type of steps to do that. Now, you have an ordinance on file about cars. I have a list of about 20 houses already that I will be entering in as a public record, and I will also be sending. I'm going to send you guys to every house that I pass or I'm driving around and finding that has cars in their yards, because you do have that one. And you do have a right because you are supposed to have them remove those cars from their yards. That's the action I have to take. So if you're not going to listen to me either way, I'm going to force you to enforce what you do already have on the books. I would appreciate any of you having a conversation with me and trying to understand why I should be paying my high taxes, and I can't get any response from any of my county commissioners. Thank you.
We had a couple of people sign up here tonight. The first is Deb Helms.
Good evening. My name is Deb Helms, and I live in unincorporated Union County. And for the record, yes, I am married to Commissioner Helms, Brian, not Christina. But I'm here speaking tonight, as I have multiple times before he was elected, expressing my concerns about my elected officials. I would like to express first my gratitude for the strong sweeping actions of this board in the less than 3 years that you've all been seated. The people of this county have made it clear that we are not in favor of turning our farmland into nothing but houses to accommodate the overgrowth of Charlotte. We want to maintain our rural community, and simply stated, our schools and roads cannot continue to support the growth that has happened over the years. I'm thankful that this board has taken action to preserve our open space and farmland. On another note, I am very displeased with the representation our county and our state has received in Raleigh. There are several state bills, mainly HB 765, that aim to take away our local voices and our ability to keep Union County rural. I live in a small cul-de-sac development on just over an acre of land. The idea that I could build 4 more houses in my yard is ridiculous. The idea that my neighbors on either side of me could also build 4 more houses in their yard, and the lady 2 houses down with 4 acres, half of that in a floodplain, could build 19 houses, not taking into account the floodplain portion, that is also absolutely ridiculous. The idea of this making housing more affordable just simply isn't the truth. In the general concept of supply and demand on the surface, I could see where that argument could be made. What isn't being discussed by those in support of this legislation is while if, and that's a big if, we were to somehow reduce the cost of housing, who is going to pay for the additional schools needed? Raleigh has already proven they won't adequately fund our schools. Are they going to bear the cost of building new schools, or are they just going to pass the current proposed legislation to lift classroom cap size and pack more kids into already overcrowded classrooms? Who's going to pay for the additional public services needed? On the agenda tonight is a discussion about a new jail. Who's going to pay for that? With higher density housing comes a burden of higher cost of public service. Somebody has to pay for that, and it won't be the legislators in Raleigh who are making these decisions. It will be the people of this community whose voices have been silenced by that legislation. Thank you to each and every one of you for standing strong for the people of this county against the direct attacks of our state legislators. We, the people here in Union County, encourage you to continue to stand strong. Thank you.
The next speaker we have is Joel Down.
Good evening, County Commissioners. As you guys all know, my name is Joel Down, and I live within the village of Wesley Chapel. I'm speaking to you this evening because when I saw the general obligation bonds on the evening that is for discussion, and also the jail project as well at the end of tonight's agenda, I was laid with heaviness from God that I was supposed to pray for you all this evening with the many financial decisions that you will have to make when it comes to the bonds that will be discussed this evening, and then also the jail project. So I would encourage everyone to bow in prayer if you don't mind with me. Dear God, the creator of heaven and earth, thank you for the many gifts you have given us. Thank you for this world you created. Thank you for your love, your grace, and your mercy that you give to us every day, but especially when you send Jesus to die on the cross for our sins. Thank you for Union County, this place we call home. Thank you for these commissioners whom you have instituted, as Romans 13:1 tells us. Thank you for all the political leaders of this nation, and I pray that you will use them for your purposes and to glorify yourself, because we are here to know you and make you known. God, I pray that you will give these commissioners, County Manager Matthews, and all of the members of staff divine wisdom, guidance, and discernment as they are finalizing the county budget over the next month. I pray that the commissioners and staff will see that the tax money is not their own. It's not the people's money, but it is ultimately your money, God, because you give all these things to us, and without you, we would be a vapor or dust, and ultimately, we would be nothing without you, Lord. Lord, I pray that you will illuminate, expose all frivolous, wasteful, ungodly, and demonic spending in Jesus' name. that you will give all these commissioners, the county manager, and staff the courage to disclose this information to the public, even though it may not be fun and that they may be ridiculed. Finally, Lord, I pray that you will bring people to a saving faith in you, not only here in Union County or this country, but throughout the world. In Jesus Christ's name, I pray, the King of Kings and Lord of Lords. Amen.
Of speakers that have either signed up online or here tonight. Are there any other speakers that are here that did not get a chance to sign up? Hearing none, we will move on to the next item on our agenda, which is item 25-283, a public hearing regarding 2/3 general obligation bonds. I will now open the public hearing and recognize Beverly Lyles, our Finance Director, for comments.
Thank you. Good evening, Commissioners. This is the required public hearing for the issuance of $13 million of 2/3 general obligation bonds. The North Carolina General Statutes requires that a public hearing is held for any general obligation bond that the county desires to issue. 2/3 general obligation bonds are an allowable debt financing method under North Carolina General Statutes, and the county is allowed to issue an amount based on the prior year's reduction in the general obligation bond principal debt. As you are aware, during the capital planning process for the current fiscal year, the adopted projects included the need to issue $13 million in general obligation bonds to provide funding for the acquisition, renovation, and expansion of public facilities, including but not limited to the Judicial Center and Governmental Center. This need has risen to the level that it has because of the county's population. We have grown tremendously since the original Judicial Center was built, and additional space is needed for judicial staff as well as courtroom space. The debt service cost for this issuance is estimated to have a maximum debt service payment amount of $1,283,000. Debt payments will begin during fiscal year 2026, and they will end in 2046. The current ad valorem tax rate is sufficient in the county's general debt fund to meet the current debt service payment obligations as well as the payments for this new issuance. We plan to issue these bonds during the month of July, and I will be glad to answer any questions you may have regarding this.
I have one question. So, taking on this debt to do this renovation, $13 million, will that impact our credit rating at any? Because we have so many other projects that we're
Right.
trying to work on.
I do not anticipate that it would impact our credit rating at this time. The credit rating agencies do look at your total overall liabilities and certain ratios related to that, but this is such a small issuance compared to some of the larger issuance that we may be faced with in the future.
Okay, thank you.
We have met with the credit rating agencies already regarding this bond and the other general obligation bonds, and we are waiting to hear back from them.
Okay, wonderful, thank you. Are there any other questions?
One quick one.
Yes.
What's the going interest rate?
Last week when I looked, it was 4.25, so 4.25%.
Well, that's down. Wasn't it over 5?
We were estimating 5% to be conservative throughout our debt modeling process. Thank you.
We did not have any speakers signed up for this public hearing, but are there any speakers here tonight that did not have an opportunity to sign up that do wish to speak? With that, I will close the public hearing, and we will move on to agenda item 25-282, the Service Award Recognition. I would like to recognize Julie Broom, our Human Resources Director, concerning this item.
Good evening, Commissioners. Last month, we held our service award ceremony for the second quarter. We were recognizing employees meeting service award milestones in April, May, and June. We had a small but mighty group. There were 17 employees that we were recognizing for this quarter. About half of those were able to join us for the ceremony. Specifically for the second quarter, we had 9 5-year recipients, 4 10-year recipients, 1 15-year recipient, 2 20-year recipients, and 1 25-year recipient. As always, there was a lot of camaraderie in the room, a lot of accolades, appreciation for accomplishments, great time had by all. We have a short video to show you to provide some highlights from that ceremony. And again, I would just like to extend my congratulations and thanks to those employees that have met their service award milestones for the second quarter. Thank you.
Welcome to all of you to our Q2 Service Award ceremony. Today we are celebrating employees who are celebrating anniversaries during the month of April, May, and June. We got some 5 years, 10, 15, and then we've got some 20s. So congratulations to all of you.
He's just a tremendous asset to our team, and we're proud to have you. So congratulations.
But you always have a good attitude, no matter what we throw at you.
Nicole, I appreciate you more than words can say. I say it all the time, but Union County thanks you as well.
It's always a blessing to be somewhere where they let you be yourself.
But he came through the door in procurement, and he was ready to go. He had done his homework, had been studying. He was just eager and ready to go. And Corey is always ready to go. And I appreciate it so much.
Well, I do feel appreciated on a daily basis because I do more help with all the departments. These type of things just show how much the organization appreciates their employees. And it's just a reminder of the work that we do is appreciated. So this is great.
This lady is like a little Tasmanian devil when it comes to work. She has an appetite like no one I've ever seen, and that's a good thing. Does not like to have idle time, does not do well when she has idle time, much prefers to be busy. And I can only imagine the mark you're leaving at 911. And God forbid, if I ever find myself in a tragedy where I need help and I call that number, I hope that you answer the phone.
So Cheryl single-handedly built a whole quality assurance and improvement program for human services. She has cultivated a highly competent team. They've achieved several quality assurance certifications and have been recognized by the state for their work.
This is our facilities maintenance supervisor, technician, know-it-all, do-it-all, knowledgeable, all that good stuff.
I was actually hoping this would be my last stop before retirement. I actually started my career in Parks and Recreation when I was 19 years old back on Long Island, and I just came full circle and hopefully will end my career doing the same thing that I loved.
It's hard to capture in just a few words the impact Miss Peggy has had over 2 decades of service. Anyone who's worked with her will tell you the same thing. She's the calm in the storm, which is very important. We work in child protective services. It's very stressful. She's always calm. She's the helping hand when you're lost in paperwork. And she's the one who always knows the answer. And we are so grateful and lucky to have you on our team, and we love you so much.
I'm very proud to recognize Karen today for her 20 years of dedicated service, leadership, and unwavering commitment to the field of social work.
I've worked really hard to balance everything. I will say that it has not been easy, but it's been worth it. It's been so worth it. I'm older now, and a lot of the younger population that I dealt with earlier in my career are now young adults now, and it's so great to see them out in the community, and they'll tell you if it wasn't for you, if it wasn't for you, I don't know if my family would have made it. I'm not in this for the money. I'm not. Like I said, I feel it's a calling. And you just have to stay focused, stay in your truth, and just do the best that you can do.
It is very obvious when you listen to the stories and the comments that you have. There's a lot of respect, there's a lot of appreciation and friendship for the people that you work with. And that's important because, and I say this quite often, we are a work family. We're here, we spend a lot of time with each other. It's good that we can treat each other like family. Sometimes we get mad at family, but that's okay. You know, we get through it. We do the things we have to do. But I'm so proud that you guys are part of this organization. You represent us well, and you do everything that makes this organization a great place to work. So I want to wish you a great day. I hope that the rest of your day is wonderful. Thank you so much for coming and sharing. Have a great day.
Well, Oz and I really hate that we missed this one. But congratulations to all of those employees, and a big thank you for their years of service, and we look forward to seeing their next appreciation, but thank you very much. The next item to be considered on the agenda is consent. Are there any motions regarding requested revisions or amendments to either the consent agenda or business?
Just kidding.
No, we got you on there tonight. We got you, Gary.
For now. For now.
Okay, yes.
If there's no amendments, I'll make the motion that we adopt the consent agenda as published.
Okay, all those in favor of the motion, say aye. 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 Good job. That brings us to the business portion of the agenda, and the first item up is item 25-294, a jail discussion. I would like to recognize Facilities Director Chris Boyd regarding this item.
Well, thank you, Madam Chair. Good evening, Commissioners. This item is to give the board an update on the jail study. Prior to that, and we have our consultants here that'll give you a presentation on where they are. Prior to that, I think there's some interest in talking about the jail timeline overall, so I wanted to go through that fairly quickly. All right, so the jail timeline starts 90 to 94 when we got a court order. In 92, we got that order consent to build the new jail. It was finished in 94. 10 years later, the jail exceeded population for the first time at 240. And so the county decided in August of '04 to start a selection process, potentially for a jail expansion. In '05, the board approved a contract for that jail study, awarded to Little, HOK, and Carter Goebel. And that was to include jail projections, programming, and some master planning on the site. In '06, there was an update on that jail study, wherein they presented a couple options, a 580-bed option and a 730-bed option. Then in '06, it's like a week later, the board decided to approve a funding plan and CIP just for design. That moved over into November when the board approved a contract for schematic design and design development for that, just for that phase, and that was a little over $1.5 million. Actual expenses ended up being like 1.4, a little over 1.4. Then in '07, in March through August, the SDDD set was complete. But in September, that was all put on hold based on the financial conditions. Of course, that was the kind of '07, '08 kind of market issue. And then there was also a decline in the jail population that was factored into that. Then move over to 2009, the jail population once again exceeded 240. And so the sheriff's office did an analysis of the state prison space in Monroe. The thought was you could get 80 inmates at a cost of $4 million over there. But the sheriff's office decided that they probably needed more information to make a decision about that. So in 2010, in February, the board approved a contract amendment for Carter Goebel. If you remember, they were awarded the design, the SDDD design, and for $25,000, they were going to do an update to that. Then in 2010, the board did receive an update on that jail study. Now, that moved the bed count from the 581 from the previous study to the 504. There was no action taken by the board during that update.
Chris, before you continue, before we move to the next slide, does a design exist from the $1.5 million that was spent in 2006? Was there ever a design?
There is.
Okay.
There's a basically a DD set that's we still own.
Okay.
It's not necessarily 100% what we're going to need, because it did include a sheriff's office.
Okay.
And we built the new sheriff's office admin facility.
Okay.
So it's not completely what we would need.
So a design was created with the 1.5, and I guess a revision or an update to that design by 2010.
That's how I understand it.
Okay.
And of course, I wasn't here in 2010, but doing the research back, there was a presentation to the board where they adjusted the bed count,
Okay.
From the 581 to 504.
Okay,
There's some things to follow that are related to it too. Mm-hmm. Then later in October, that was to do a study of that, the jail, the Monroe jail. So in October of that year, in 2010, they approved an additional design services to revisit design based on that bed revision of $350,000. So the board did at that time direct staff to look at a 224 and 448 option with no 911 center. There was at a time a plan to include 911 as part of that jail design. And so at that point, they decided not to include the 911 center and have those two options to consider. So moving over to 2011 in February, the board did initiate the process for financing jail needs. So it wasn't real specific on what that was when we looked at the minutes. And then shortly after that, 30 days later, the board approved evaluation of a 3P or a P3 public-private partnership that could potentially fund the jail. So then later in March, actually same meeting, Little and HOK did a presentation to the board, and it was a pretty significant phased plan. You can see those 5 phases. I won't go through them, but basically it was over time building out according to that phasing. So from 2011, nothing is on record having happened with the jail. But then in 2019, there were some issues related to structural settlement at the jail. So we did engage ARP Engineering to study that situation. Their findings were that there was a 3/4 to an inch of settlement on the admin portion of the facility due to poor soil compaction. There was a solution on the table that could have cost anywhere from $500,000 to $700,000 just for that one section. And it just so happened that we were in the middle of designing the new sheriff's office admin facility. So the thought was that we build it and we kind of shut down that back portion until a decision on jail and how we're going to move there was taking place. So there was some decisions made not to do that 500 to 700,000 based on building a new admin facility. All right, moving to 2020. As we were working on the sheriff's office admin facility, we did do a master plan so that we could be informed to site the new building in the right place in case a new jail was ever built. So that's kind of how we approached the master plan. Now, that master plan did include a two-phase plan with initial 376 bed with a 600 bed core, and then phase 2 would have been some years later at 224 beds. And you can see what the cost estimates were on that in 2020. In 2022, we had them update the cost on that two-phase plan. So nothing happened with that in 2022. Then in 2024, we did include in the CIP, fiscal year 24, almost $2.4 million to start looking at advanced planning for a 600 bed, 600 core facility. In that 2024 presentation, we did look at a 400, 600, 500, 600, and a 600, 600, and gave you some pricing on best at the time estimates on building those options. All right, so then we moved to 2025. In February at the board retreat, we did present a 400, 800, a 600, 800, those two options to the board. In March, we also talked about a 400, 600, and a 500, 600. And those options were approved to move forward move the jail study forward with those two options. And so that brings us, we're here tonight to give you an update on where we are with the study and where the consultants are with the study. Tonight's update is going to kind of focus on three areas. One is programming, which informs how big those two options need to be from a square foot standpoint. They also include updated estimates based on that square footage. And then they're going to talk about an operational expense model for the two options. So you'll see staffing plan, you'll see other operational costs, and you'll see how those total up at those two option sizes. Thing to consider, this is an all-in, those estimates for operational costs are all in if the jail is full and it's fully operational. I think the sheriff has shared in many discussions, presentations that this will be an incremental cost. You know, year one, you're not going to have to utilize that, but we wanted to show you what it's going to be once it gets full, and you got to staff the thing fully. So I'm going to turn over the presentation on the jail study update to our consultants. We've got Alan Richardson with Justice Planners and Thomas Carlson Reddick with Little Architecture, so they'll give you an update on where they are.
But before you
Unless
leave,
you've got any questions for me.
I do. I don't suppose you're keeping a running total of all the studies over the past 10, 15 years that have been paid for a new jail facility.
Yeah, I think this timeline is the best thing we have right now. If the board wants, we can certainly get a little more, technical. But this timeline is about the best we can do with.
So just add it all up.
Yeah, we'll have to add it up and bring you that number.
I would be very curious to see that, how much we've spent getting ready to get ready.
Or get ready to stop.
Yeah, I would agree. It's a lot of money that we've invested so far.
We probably built it.
Yeah. Okay. So, go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Chris, just real quick, so if you could well, I don't know if I can single in on one slide here. There's a lot of information, obviously. I think obviously that everybody can discern that this is something that's been going on for quite some time. My question, though, is that historically, the original plans for the new jail facility, that would have included the new administrative office, and that would have also included the 911 center in the early versions of the jail. Am I understanding that correctly?
Yeah, I think in programming and the SDDD, there was consideration of both of those being a part of the program, but quickly the 911 centers pulled out and not a part of that equation. But the admin facility remained, and it remains in that DD set that we talked about earlier.
And I realize that this might have been before your time there, but any idea why the 911 center was pulled out of that project scope, or why we separated up those three projects, the administrative building, the 911 center, and then now the jail?
Yep, I'd have to say it's before my time, and I wasn't a part of those conversations, so I'd hate to guess.
Okay, fair enough. Thank you, sir.
Okay, so I'll turn it over to our consultants. Oh, yeah. All right.
May I go first? Good evening. Thanks for your time and attention as we walk through the next steps of this jail study. As has been presented so far, we were tasked with coming up with a square footage program for a 400-bed facility with a 600-bed core and a 500-bed facility also with a 600-bed core. We met with the sheriff and jail staff back in early spring. So far as operations and various operational components that should be a part of the jail, we took that information, went back and basically applied square footage to every office, every cell, every janitor's closet to go in the facility to come up with a couple of different space programs, which this table represents. The total square footage, total building gross square footage, all in for two options, and what the difference between the two are. Is broken down into 14 different component areas, from the lobby to visitation to booking to housing. You can see all the various components that are there. The only difference in square footage is in the housing support and in the housing numbers for the two options. For a 600-bed core, your visitation area, your health services, your food service is pretty much going to be unchanged. It's going to be the same. So you build that core in, and then when the time comes, if the time comes to add an additional 100 beds, to take it from 400 to 500, then that's already there to support that. So your difference of just over 30,600 square feet comes from the additional housing space and housing support space for the 500-bed jail option.
Can I ask a question, please?
You certainly can.
Code 400, administration.
Right.
We have an administration building, do we not? What is this for?
This is for the jail commander, for their staff, for all the administrative functions for the jail operations.
And that's not done?
This was put together as if we were going to have a totally new replacement jail facility. If decisions are made, if options are made to keep part of what you have, demolish some, add on to what you have, this would be an all-in replacement type facility. In other words, it should not grow beyond what we have here presented.
And can you expand on the difference between housing support and housing?
Well, I mean,
Housing is obviously the beds.
Housing support are areas such as a classroom, some program spaces, counseling spaces, video court appearance. To make this facility as efficient as possible, we wanted to limit inmate movement within the facility as much as possible. So whatever services are going to be offered, the more we can take to the housing unit or close to the housing unit, we're going to minimize that internal movement of inmates to keep from having to move them and transport them all throughout the facility. Yes, ma'am. Any other questions on this at this point? Okay.
Okay, so now I get to talk about cost. And there's multiple things we're going to talk about in regard to cost. One is the construction cost, then there'll be the soft costs, and then there's things like escalation, and then we're getting into operations cost for direct costs for staff, as well as what it costs to operate a building. So the 400 bed, 600 core, you can see here is about 180,000 square feet. And based on recent construction costs for these types of facilities, we're looking at about 115 million for a project of this size. Typical soft costs for buildings, and most of you have done buildings before, they typically are around 20%, but with recent jails that we've done, we're seeing that in about 15%, and those soft costs are, fees, surveys, geotech, all sorts of other factors, equipment, furniture, etc. Escalation is a little unpredictable, as you all know, right? But we're looking at 3% for 2 years, so that leads us to the total that you see here. The 180,000 square feet came from Alan's program, right? You had some questions about that. We haven't designed anything yet, right? So we know when we design a building, we're going to look at maximizing the efficiency the best we can, but you don't want to tell you that, oh, we can do it for this much square footage until you start designing it. But our goal is to make it more efficient, and we would not be exceeding that. The next one is the 500 beds with a 600 core, and same thing. We're looking at construction costs, the same per square foot. You're looking at soft costs, the same percentage, and your escalation. So you see the differences between those two. I think the cost per square foot that you see is 640. That's based on a project that was bid about 6 months ago. So it's in line with, but there's different ways that these kinds of facilities can be built. So once we get into design, we can look at different efficiencies and find ways to maximize your dollars. So the next thing we want to talk about is staff. We're not going to get into cost yet, but let Alan talk to you a little bit about the staffing needs for a facility like this.
Just before we get into the particulars of the staffing, this is going to be very similar to the square footage numbers that we just talked about. While we were able to meet with the sheriff and the sheriff's staff several months ago on the initial planning of the operations, this is our best estimate at this point in time of the square footage that would be required for the facilities. The sheriff has not had input. I don't know if he's been able to review it, but has not had input on those spaces, on those square footages so far, nor has he had any input or his staff on these staffing numbers. If you should elect to move forward with the project, the square footage numbers are going to be refined, obviously, at each step of the way as the progress moves forward. The same with the staffing numbers. This is my first cut at staffing a building that doesn't exist, and the staffing should also be reviewed at every key step and milestone along the way throughout the process. We've got staffing numbers for a 400-bed facility and a 500-bed facility. Just with the square footage, everything that you see above detention deputy doesn't change with the two options. The number of administrative staff, the number of supervisory staff would remain the same. Administrative positions at all. The detention deputies would increase by approximately 23 staff, FTEs, full-time equivalents, by adding the additional 100 beds going to a 500-bed option from a 400-bed option. One thing that this does include is an estimated relief factor for staffing. Let me explain what that is. For a typical 9-to-5 office job, if you call in sick one day, your work is going to be waiting for you tomorrow whenever you feel better and come back in. You can't do that with a housing unit full of inmates. You can't just shut that down for the day. So someone has to be there and cover that. And ideally, you don't want that always to be overtime staff, because then you're going to have overtime. You get to the point where you have forced or mandatory overtime as well. And so we factor in relief for those times where you're on vacation or you're out sick or FMLA or jury duty or what have you. My understanding, they don't currently have a relief factor built in to staffing. I stand to be corrected, but I don't believe that that they do. I went with a conservative factor based on numerous staffing projects that I have worked on before. Again, should you elect to move forward with this project, this is something that should be revisited at every major step along the way, and to have an accurate relief factor calculated to be able to apply and updated as you go along throughout this process. Make sense? Awesome. Now TCR is going to talk about money again.
Okay, so one of the biggest expenses for a facility like this is your staff, right? And you have a current facility of about 73 staff, and direct expenses are $7.3 million. If we're looking at Alan's numbers that he just shared with you, you'd be looking at about 12.9 for the 400 and a 15.2 for the 500. Now, as Chris said earlier, that might not be day one. You know, that might be, you know, ultimately to build when you get to 400 or 500. And so if you look at those numbers, you know, they correlate more or less dollar amount per staff. These do not have any escalation at this point. You know, you all control kind of basically what folks are paid, but just wanted to make sure that you're aware that this does not have any escalation. So then there's operational costs, and we've been given by you all data on what it costs to operate your facility. And operating means, you know, it's maintaining the facility, it's food, it's medical, it's outsourcing things, et cetera. And currently, you know, your expenses for operating are 5.8. And if we look at that based on the square footage of your existing facility, you're at $84 per square foot. How does that measure against other facilities? It seems like it's in line. Could we be more efficient than that? Perhaps. But until we design, it's hard to say. So if you extrapolate the 84 times the square footage of the new facilities, you can see those estimated operational expenses for the 400 as well as the 500. So that gives you a sense of the staff expenses as well as the operational expenses for the facility. But it's also important then to look at, you know, the total. So if you look at the total for the 400, you're looking at staff at 12.9 and the operating 15, so a total of 28. And then for the 500, your staff's 15 and your operating 17 for a total of 32. So that's a lot of numbers thrown at you. We know it's a lot of cost. We think it's our responsibility to you at this stage to just be as direct as we can, so you understand what these facilities cost to build and to run and to operate. And if it moves to the next stage, we'll do everything we can to tighten these numbers. I think that's the last slide. Yes, it is. So probably have lots of questions.
Commissioner Helms, and then we'll go Commissioner Sides.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I've got just a couple of questions, and if we can go back to square footage. We've got some numbers in this presentation that kind of compare current, conditions or current expenses, I should say. But if we can go back to the square footage here, I'm just curious with the proposed scope here of the 400 bed, 600 core, and then also the 500 bed and 600 core. We're looking at 180,000 square feet and then 211,000 square feet respectively.
Yeah.
What is the current size of our facility now, today?
About 69,000 square feet.
69,000.
For 260
And
something.
okay, so I mean conservatively, let's just say 65. And then if we can go to the cost analysis for operational cost analysis, it's probably more like an estimate. At this point, I believe you guys are got a moving target here with
this
your
one
numbers.
here, that one.
Yep.
Yep.
So, yes, this one here.
Yep.
So currently with our current situation and based off the information in this slide here, we're getting that $5,800,345 based off of operating food, medical, and outsourced housing. Am I understanding that information correctly?
Yeah.
So this does not take into consideration things like utilities. It doesn't take into consideration like janitorial or custodial services, grounds, landscaping, security, HVAC maintenance, fire extinguishers. I'm just saying, it doesn't take into account all of the operating costs that we probably have currently, and then certainly what we would, expect to see a significant increase in the future.
Yeah. Correct me if I'm wrong. I have colleagues with,
I can,
go ahead.
share, if you see the operating line
Yeah.
under current direct operating costs,
Right.
that's where utilities, landscaping, HVAC
HVAC.
maintenance, all those things are included in that one generic line.
Okay, so that number does include that?
It does.
Okay, I just wanted to, all right.
Yeah, there might be a few little things, Chris, that were mentioned that might not be, but I think for the more or less, they're in there. Yeah.
Okay, I think that's important to point out because, based off of what we're seeing here, I think it can easily be misinterpreted that some of those things are not factored into that cost.
Okay.
Now, the estimates here that we're looking at, would that assume the same factors or the same criteria then? Or what are we basing the 15,120,000 and then, can you expand a little bit further? I want to see if this is an apples to apples comparison. That's what I'm looking at.
Yeah, it's really looking at how you're operating now and assuming that it might operate similarly. Until we design it, it's hard to know. So could we design a more efficient building, for example, HVAC? Yes, of course, so maybe that number can come down, relative to what you're currently operating. When it comes to food and medical, I gotta believe that seems to me that would be similar. I can't imagine that would change a lot.
Contract.
Yeah. Depends on your contract, yeah.
Sure.
When it comes to the outsourced housing, that's a tricky one because hopefully there isn't any outsourced housing,
Yeah. Okay. I think that answers my questions. Again, I'm trying to make sure that we're looking at things and being equal with what we factor in our current expenses versus what the projected expense would be in the future.
I think it's a great question. It's, we're in the programming stage, at a very high level.
Sure.
We did check with some of our other clients to see what their operating costs are, Brian, and see, are we in the same ballpark? And checking with them, yes, we are. What we're seeing, operating costs of what you all have and what we're projecting are in line with what they're doing.
One last question. The cost per square foot.
Yeah.
I believe that I can't remember who said it, but I believe someone said that was based off of a more recent
Yeah.
jail project.
Yeah, yeah.
I'm not asking for specifics, but does the size, the scale of the locality or the municipality that did that, is that similar in comparison to Union County?
Yeah, yeah, it's a little bit smaller, but yeah.
Was that located within the state of North Carolina?
It's in South Carolina.
South Carolina. Okay.
See, you draw from the same market, I think, contractor-wise, I think, Brian, so it'd be a similar market, similar subs. But one of the things that's interesting in jails, I don't want to get into the weeds too much, is that the biggest part of it are the units, the cells, right? So what do you choose? How do you choose to build them? Are they steel? Are they precast? Are they concrete blocks? So there's a lot of different ways that can be done, and that drives the cost. So we'd have to work with you to determine what's the best path forward.
Well, I can tell you that, at least from my opinion on the matter, we're not building a 5-star resort.
Oh, absolutely not.
So,
none of them are 5-star.
Yeah, so,
yeah.
Do you take into account how many beds are per cell when you're making these estimates?
Yes.
How many beds are
Well,
per cell?
Yeah, like Alan talked to you.
Yeah, we were directed to do, plan for double occupancy, so it's 2 beds
Two
per
per
cell.
cell. Okay.
Right.
Commissioner Sods?
A couple questions, and I'm going to digress on you a little bit, and a little
Sure.
bit slightly different. What would be the design timeline from the word go to actually have a design and get ready to bid, build at risk, whatever?
Let's ask the architect. Who will be designing?
Typically, Gary, there's a lot of steps. There's schematic design. We want to review it with you. We want to get an estimate. You get a contractor on board, right? And then we go into design development. Schematic, say 3 months. DD, design development, 3 months. But then you gotta get an update, right, on the cost. Then you go to construction documents that say that's like four months, right? Then you gotta get a permit. There's back and forth on that. You gotta get the final estimate, and then you gotta bid it. So all told, you're looking at a year typically from go
1 year.
until you're ready to start construction, and that would be aggressive, frankly, of a project of this magnitude, but that gives you a ballpark.
And I know it's going to vary according to which size we go with number of beds.
Yeah.
But let's say, start at the bottom, 400. How long are you looking at construction time? 3, 4 years?
Frank, I think, what do we do? Two?
Yeah, we're thinking about 2, so I think conservatively it'd be, 3 years.
3 years?
Yeah, conservatively. I would imagine it'd be.
Is that going to change much if you jump up to 500?
I wouldn't think so.
Okay.
Not significantly.
Okay, so 3 years to build. And if you don't have this with you, I certainly understand, because I don't have it with me. If you started your design, and it's taken you a year, and then 3 years to build, based on your population projections that you'd offered previously, how many beds would fill the place day one? Would 400 fill the place day one when it opened? Or let me ask a different way. How many would you need day one based on that timeline, that you'd be at capacity again?
4 years from now, in essence.
Right, 4 years from now.
If you can hum and dance for a minute.
He has it. He's
I know, it's
pulling it
just
up now.
under one of those tabs.
Yeah, yeah. I wish I could fill time with something, Alan, but
Yeah, me too.
You have another question?
I was trying to think of another question, but I was going to
I have a
ask you for
question.
5. Go ahead, please.
While
Sure.
you work on that. And Chris, you may want to chime in on this. But because of the question that was asked earlier, over the past 10 years, board after board after board has done a jail study. It would appear that $4.5 million, if not more, has been spent on engineering and jail design studies. Is your design starting from scratch? Like, or were you part of the design process, 10 years ago? Is there any consideration for the $4.5 million that Union County has already spent on design, or are we starting over?
So basically.
Are we using anything?
Any pieces from what we've already paid for? It's probably gonna be hard to do.
My thoughts on it are is it's gonna be very difficult to use any of the information.
That's what I figured.
Any design work that's happened so far.
Yeah.
Because
Yep.
especially the 07 DD set was, included sheriff's office. And it just is gonna be difficult, I think, to utilize that. Now, because Little was a part of that team, I think that there may be some benefits to maybe the cell design, those kind of things, but there's been even changes in technology and design of cells, what kind of cells we're going to use. So all those questions have to be answered. If we land on typical, standard, traditional cells, then maybe we can utilize.
Hey, Chris, I don't mean to interrupt. The live stream is having a hard time picking up sound, so if you all would be able to talk into the microphone, just so people watching at home can hear.
And I'm going to jump in. So the Board of Education, Union County Public Schools, 15 years ago or whatever it was, 20 years ago, they knew they were looking at doing a transportation facility because their bus fleet, there were so many people coming in, the student population was just doubling and, increased significantly over a decade. So when the number of students are quadrupling almost every other year, they had allocated money and designed a transportation facility. But they had to put it on hold because they had to build Stallings Elementary. They needed another elementary school. They couldn't spend it on a bus transportation. They had to immediately start building elementary schools, and we wound up with, Weddington, Marvin, Cuthbertson, Stallings in the Porter Ridge area. And then, years and years went by. So, they probably, I can't remember the numbers, I'm going to make them up. So let's say their buses went from like needing 100 buses to run per day to now they had a fleet of over 400 buses. So they knew they needed an adequate, bus garage to take care of the fleet of buses. One that could take care of 100 buses certainly couldn't take care of the 450 they now had. But so when they were ready to do that, that design was there. And all they had to do was take that design that had been put on hold and tweak it and update it and bring everything to code and what they wanted to do, 10 or 15 years later. And they went, and now they have a new transportation facility on Gold Mine. So that's what I have in the background when I'm asking you. We've spent $4.5 to $5 million of taxpayer money on a design of a new jail, and that's why I'm asking, is there anything there but you're saying we can't use anything, that $5 million is just gone?
Yeah, maybe I can defer to Little because they did the DD design, and whether it's something, defer to Little because of their involvement in the DD design. So I don't know if you've got anything to share on whether there's any usefulness to the design as it stands.
I think it's a good question, and, Kelly, Frank, and myself were not involved with that. We do have the documents. We will look at that, and we will evaluate it to make sure that we can use anything that's in that can benefit you and benefit the timeline and obviously maximize dollars. I do know, though, codes, requirements for these types of facilities are very complex. They change a lot. So I don't want to say, yes, we'll just use it and when we really can't. So I promised you, Melissa, that we will look at the documents we have and see if there's something useful as we move forward. The other thing is, as Alan said, we're going with all double cells, right? And I don't think in the original jail that we were doing that. So, you know, it's you know, we want to do what's right for you all. We want to design an efficient facility, and so it might not be even the right fit. You might not say, no, that's not the jail we want that's going to serve us. So we need to
And I'm
make
just
sure.
looking for the answer, to be honest with you. I'm not trying to back you in a corner and say, hey,
Sure.
go find that design, and
Yeah.
is there anything we can use? It was truly a simple question.
Yeah, yeah.
Does that design exist? Do we even know where it is?
Yep.
And is there anything that can be salvaged out of
Sure.
the $4.5 to $5 million that we've invested? And if the answer is no, then we start from scrap.
Very good.
We
Yep.
start with a blank piece of paper.
I'll just chime in real quick on that. The jail code for new construction for jails has recently changed within about the past 4 or 5 years. So the standards that, you know, Little may have designed to back then, you know, they have changed, and there are some new requirements that do have to be taken into account, so.
And I would assume the same would go with a bus that transports, you know, hundreds of kids every day. I would assume there's safety, you know, things there too. But, you know, having that experience where the bus transportation facility was put on hold because we had to build new schools for this growing population, just want to know if there was anything out there, because I'm sure they had codes as well. Yes.
You mentioned that codes were recently updated in the last 4+ years. How often are codes updated, and if we start on this now, will what we already have in place be obsolete and changes and/or additions need to be made?
For the jail code, the state of North Carolina does not do updates on their jail code very often. I think the last time they did a revision prior to this one was like 15, 20 years prior to that. So they are, you know, thankfully fairly steady. And then, of course, you know, with the, you know, state building code, plumbing code, mechanical, they all make adjustments from, you know, from time to time. And I'd say, I don't know, what do you think, TCR, maybe every 3 years-ish, you know, the state adopts a newer code, so. And all buildings are going to have to comply with that, not just jails, so.
I think Alan has numbers. So to go back to that question.
I was just going to say, this is taking too long, but Saved by the bell.
Before we jump all the way back there, I will say, I don't know how long ago that design was made, but since COVID, since 2020, the typical profile of the inmate population has changed quite a bit, not just in Union, but across the country. You're no longer housing your low-level nonviolent misdemeanor folks here. And so the folks that are in jail typically are folks that need to be in jail. So the custody level, security level needs have changed since probably those initial designs or previous designs that we're talking about. Going back to your school bus analogy, you talked about the student population increasing as much as they have. The general population of Union County is projected to increase by over 60% in the next 25 years. Using that as one of many factors in our inmate population and bed space projections. Now, sir, getting back to your question, 5 years from now, in 2030, we have projected an average daily population of 349 inmates with 435 beds required to be able to house those folks in 5 years. And as you may recall, our 25-year projection was for a total bed space in need of 822. And so that's a pretty big discrepancy looking 5 years out, 4 to 5 years out now as to what those needs may be.
And bearing in mind, any financing vehicle are going to be 20-year bonds.
In all likelihood.
Yeah.
That's all for me.
Commissioner Helms?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Chris, this is probably a question for you because it goes back to the timeline that you shared with us. One of the things that you had mentioned was that in 2019, we had a study performed by ARP Engineering. So if I understood correctly, and please correct me if I'm wrong, because that's why I'm asking the question, we never really enacted the $500,000 or $700,000 fix for that because that was a part of the administrative building. I want to
Yes, clarify. That's right. It was part of,
Okay.
that building that was seeing this settlement was part of administration.
So that's not a part of the jail, that's a part of the administration.
Yeah, the sheriff's office administration, not jail administration.
Okay, all right. So I do have a question regarding the old jail though, and that's in our previous discussion regarding scope, size, assessment, needs, all that stuff. One of the things that we had asked about, and if you guys need to get back to me on this, is fine, but with the existing jail that we have now, the current facility, one of the things that we discussed was whether or not that facility could be used for anything. I mean, storage, whatever it might be, but is there any potential uses for that facility moving forward? Because what we're discussing here would be a complete and total replacement. So has staff gotten any kind of updates on that? Any idea about any potential uses for that building in the future?
Yeah, we don't have any updates. We can certainly focus on that and bring that to the board at another date. There are a lot of potential uses. To your point, storage, it can be overflow. The issues I think become you still have to maintain and operate it if you're going to use it. And so, when you're looking at the cost to operate, it stacks on top of each other if you build a completely new jail and you utilize the existing jail for other purposes. Not to say that's not the best approach. I mean, it could be a great approach for utilizing a resource that's there. I think there will be, the housing piece will be limited to housing, It's kind of like this building. We do use the old cells to store things in. It's not the greatest situation, but at the time it was good for us. So yeah, I think we can certainly come back to you with a more detailed list of what potentially those spaces could be used for. Now, its location is going to dictate that it's mostly going to be secure type of use, not general county use, coming in and using those things, because it's still in the general vicinity of any new jail that we build is going to be in the same vicinity.
Okay, and that's fair. I mean, by all means, please bring us back some information on
We
that
will.
because, I mean, again, this is assuming, a completely new build, and if there's some potential use for that facility, even in a limited capacity, I'd like to have information on that. And then the other aspect of that is, on the flip side, if there is not, obviously, this right here is the cost, we're talking about rough estimates, capital and operating expense right here for a brand new facility. What's the cost to the taxpayer about tearing down the old one?
Well, that is, I think, included in, it was included in previous estimates. I don't know if it's included in these estimates. It's around, I think it's $800,000 to knock it down, is what I recall from previous estimates.
Well, and I would imagine that there's things that, are in the current facility that you can't just throw in a dumpster. You're going to have to find ways to dispose of, certain things.
Well, there's a lot of steel, so there'll be a lot of people interested in in salvage. It is a salvage operation.
Sure. Okay. Yeah, if we can get some numbers on that as well, because I think that that we need to prepare for both scenarios. So we need to know what we're up against. If this proposal does not include demolition, then by all means we need some info on that, and then again options for use of that if anything's salvageable. Thank you.
Okay? Thank you.
Commissioner Sides?
I want to make sure I'm clear on the term core. When you build a jail with a 600-bed core, a core is not expandable in itself. You would have to build another structure, like an annex. Is that correct?
Yeah, I'm going to defer that to the designers. I'm not a designer myself, so I'm going to defer that.
I'll take a stab at that, and I'm hoping I'm understanding your question right. So when we design for a 600 core,
Yes.
there's space in the building, in medical,
Right, to add beds.
laundry,
Yeah.
et cetera, to be able to expand that if beds are added in the future. So
Right.
say that if you have 400 beds initially and you want to add 200 more beds,
So you build it at a
that
600 core.
that core would be able to accommodate those 200 beds without
Right.
having to build anything new.
Right,
Now, if you want to go beyond that,
yeah.
that gets a little tricky. So as designers, what we'd have to do is think about, okay, where are those core elements? How would they expand? Where is it on the site? Can it be expanded without interrupting security and safety and all those factors? But the core is all those things that are non-cell related. So the space is there, and it can be expanded as the beds increase.
So, in taking in that, I'm going to say maybe, but very expensive, very difficult. So, when you decide, the decision is made on what core size, of course separate from beds, but core size,
Yeah.
you better be darn sure that's what you're going to need for the next 20, 25, however years
Yeah.
you want this thing to last, because then you're doubling down
Yeah.
or significantly making changes, or like I said, adding an annex, entirely another structure. So you need to be as precise as you can, or go with what you can as far as the core, knowing that this is pretty much what you've got for a good while.
Yeah.
So that's fair to say?
Yeah.
All right, okay.
And I think our approach, to take it a step further, is to make sure that we design it so they can be adapted as things arise, right? So to minimize disruption.
I mean, what do you mean adapted? You mean add beds, correct?
You
Or
want to be
add-
able to add beds easily.
Yeah.
And if the building needs to expand, you want to make sure you design it so it could expand easily.
The
without
core could be expanded?
some parts of it.
So now you're telling me it's a maybe.
It's very difficult to do, and it's unusual. It's highly unlikely that
All right,
you would
that's
do
what
that,
I'm looking
Gary.
for.
Yeah.
What I'm trying to get a handle on is, first of all, how long do we want this thing to last?
Right.
Hopefully at least until it's paid for.
Right.
And maybe long exceeds,
Yeah.
50 year, say 50-year jail.
Yeah.
So you better be using good projections on the size of your core
Right.
project outs for those
Yeah.
X number of years, because you are obviously designing it to add beds,
Yeah.
but that core better be what you want it to be for a good long while.
Yeah.
Fair?
Yeah.
Okay.
Are there any other questions? Yep. Commissioner Balcom.
I'm not really sure who I should direct this question to, but just challenging the number just a little bit on the staffing cost of 15.2 million on the 500, 600, and the operational cost of 17.725 on the 500, 600. We currently, our jail currently now is rated at 240, is that correct? 264. I would like to know what our current staffing and operational cost is, because the numbers, if you take the numbers across the board, we should be a little bit north of 13 million if those numbers cross over and are accurate.
13.1, I think is what 13.1, sir.
13.1?
Yep.
Okay, thank you very much.
Yeah, I'll just clarify that I think the jail's rated at 240. It's got 264 beds in it, that's right, but the state says its capacity is 240.
That's a very good point that you brought up that I missed. Just because you build a jail to 400 beds doesn't mean you can have 400 inmates in there, right? Maybe the sheriff's department, yeah.
Excellent point. Typically, when a jail is 80 to 85% of capacity, operationally speaking, you're full. Analogy that I'll often use, if you have 100 inmates and 100 beds, somebody's going to be sleeping on the floor while there are unused beds in other areas. You cannot house males and females together, special needs and general population, minimum and maximum.
You got to keep gang members apart. You've got people that are co-defendants you have to separate. So there are a lot of extenuating circumstances.
Exactly.
You can't just have one guy to a bed.
Correct.
Okay.
And so for a 400-bed facility, once you hit 80 to 85% of that number, operationally, you're considered full.
So that's another consideration that is just as important as your core size.
Agreed. And that is why, to your previous question a little while ago, looking 4 or 5 years out, with our projections, we're showing that in 5 years, in 2030, your average daily population will be 349. Total beds needed for those 349 are 435. For that very reason, for peaking, for classification. Sometimes you have to take a unit down and offline for maintenance and repair, painting. If you
New
don't
door
have
locks?
Door locks. If you don't have that swing space, it's very difficult to accomplish.
So using those factors,
Yes.
if we built the jail to whatever core, but only 400 beds, we would be over capacity day one.
That's probably a
Using
safe
these
assumption.
projections.
Oh,
We built-
using these projections, yes,
We built a new jail, and we're overflow already.
entirely likely, yes.
Okay.
Madam Chair.
Commissioner Helms.
Thank you. I think it's also fair to say that projections can change, and there's variables that can change projections, and, I think that there's a number of things that could factor in where maybe that's not the case. And, we've already gone over numbers. We've already, talked about this. You guys have came in here, and I think we can agree to disagree, because I'm inclined to think that, your original projection there of 822 beds, I believe it was.
Right.
Is not something that Union County needs. And so, do we need a new jail? Yeah, probably so. Do we need one of that kind of scope? No, I don't think so. And I understand what Commissioner Sides is getting at, but, again, variables go both ways, okay? And so we're seeing growth projections, and we're seeing, all sorts of different things there that factor into this, but, there's two sides to the coin.
There are, and projections can change. You're absolutely right. And that's why our alternate projection was not 822, it was over 1,200.
Which I would argue is still too high.
I would hope that you could keep the numbers below.
But we won't
1,200
know
beds.
until that year gets here. Who's right or who's wrong? That's why it's a projection.
That's
You
why it's a
guys,
projection.
you folks use your knowledge, your training, your expertise, your experience, and say, using all the variables we have, all the information we have, this is what we project.
It is based upon the information we have today.
Sure.
And we don't know what the legislature is going to do next year, 10 years from now. Based upon the information and knowledge that we have today and the data, because we got an awful lot of data from the jail, from local law enforcement. Unfortunately, we couldn't get the court's information on that. Statistically speaking, it's the best projections we have with the data that's available today.
Best you do with what you got.
Sure.
Okay, well, thank you very much.
Thank you very
We
much.
appreciate all of your help and your numbers, everything that you've given to us.
Thank you for your time.
Next on the agenda is item 25-307. I want to recognize Commissioner Gary Sides to speak about the visit he had to the Cabarrus County Jail As this item was requested by Mr. Sides, I will recognize him for this item.
And I'm going to be very brief because frankly, from the information I've gathered here tonight and before, I don't think it's going to work for us the way they did it. And I'll tell you why. They got a 20-year head start on us. In early 2000, about the time we were getting sued, Cabarrus County moved forward. They were in the same deal, overcapacity, crumbling infrastructure, and they built a 96-bed annex property as their first phase to try and alleviate their overcrowding. If you've ever been in downtown Concord, it's right there. Then they came back and in 2011 opened a 550-bed actual replacement jail. Now, an annex of 96 beds for us, financially, looking at the numbers, makes no sense. If you recall, last meeting, we were forced to cancel the construction contract to fix locks on cell doors. And then, what was it, a couple of days later, that story about the New Orleans jailbreak, partially due to broken door locks, came out, and I'm going, holy cow, this is karma. Anyway, I'm going to switch gears a little bit from my tour, but I want to thank all the folks at the Cabarrus County Sheriff's Office, Captain Wallace. They have an excellent operation. I'm going to, if you recall back, we were entertaining and working on a contract to utilize their space they have in their annex by having our detention officers take our detainees up there, supervise them, and then they would come back. Well, that's not feasible because we're shorthanded and you can't have our people running up and down the road. So I would like to propose something else and ask the sheriff, if you want to come forward, any of your folks, what I'd like to do is to reopen those negotiations with a slight twist. What I would like to do is to enter into a contract in terms agreeable to both, of course, to basically contract with Cabarrus County to provide detention officer services specifically for our detainees. So they train detention officers, they're employees of Cabarrus County. We would, of course, in the contract, would pay for the salary, the taxes, the benefits, just like we would for our own employees, but they are Cabarrus County employees at the Cabarrus County Detention Facility, specifically to supervise our detainees. This is the fastest way I can think of to generate capacity at our existing jail. First of all, for the repairs that are badly needed, locks, etc., but just give our detention officers some elbow room. So it would have to be, it should be a very multi-year contract, 4 to 5 years, because you're looking at the construction time, if we did anything anyway, is going to be in that time frame. And at least, baseline, it could go anywhere, but we could start with the baseline. How fast could you get your supervisory and your detention officers hired and trained so we could ship at least one block of 50 prisoners up there so that we can do the repairs on our jail that are badly needed, and continue that contract until we have a new replacement, whatever you want to call it, facility in place. I think that is, frankly, the only option, because we cannot sustain a situation where we have a jail with all kinds of cracks running down the walls, broken door locks. It is not a safe environment for our staff, as well as under capacity. When our officers, when our deputies pick up somebody has to go out the back door on the street because we don't have the capacity. We have a full-time assistant DA who's trying to figure out how to make room at the existing jail. Now, to me, that's the antithesis of public safety. So I'd like to see if the sheriff would have an interest in talking with his counterparts up there and Sheriff Shaw and see if there might be some kind of arrangements that could bring back to the board for consideration and what funding would be required. And it would be a moving part because they might have detention officers that they decide to promote out of the contract program, make them an SRO, a sergeant, what have you, and then they would backfill with someone else. But we would be basically contracting with Cabarrus County Sheriff's Office for detention space. They have the space, We have the need for space. It's a win-win situation for both. And we, of course, would still be responsible for medical costs for the prisoners. We would have to pay their room and board that we had talked about previously. I think this is worth exploration. I'd like to, if the sheriff have an interest in talking to Sheriff Shaw and see what we might be able to work back for consideration for this board and what funding would be required. Do you have any thoughts on that, Sheriff?
Well, I would say this, you'd have to get the sheriff's buy-in from Cabarrus County. Then he's gonna have to get the county commissioner's buy-in from Cabarrus County. I don't know how that works. I don't know their commissioners, but it's all negotiation, and I'm just not sure what progress we can make without, if you want to start, we can start that process.
Well, if you don't think it's worth your while, I mean, I can't think of anything else to create capacity in a short enough time frame to address some of these immediate needs in our crumbling building.
Well, I agree with you there. I can't think of anything either. And, but to do that, you've got to have buy-in from the whole county in Cabarrus County, or the commissioners and the sheriff. And I'm not sure, I'm thinking about it while I'm standing here, and he's somewhat like we are. They pay more money. They hire people at a higher price than we do. They have to get them hired, trained, and put in place. So that's months down the road. So I'm not sure how quick, even if we signed a contract tonight, that could happen.
We would obviously have to make it a no-lose situation for them. They're not going to pay just to help us out.
They're not going to do that.
But if they've got it, I'm just thinking out loud, if they've got a partially or totally empty annex, everybody wins. Yeah, you're absolutely right. They may say, no, thanks, you figure your own folks out.
I don't have an answer for you. But
until we talk to them, we don't even know if it's.
I don't know if it's feasible.
Yeah.
And let me jump in here. Thank you both. I don't know if Patrick can help me with this or if the county manager can help me with this, but I'm trying to recall the letter or the statement we received from Cabarrus County. Were they having hiring issues that they did not feel that they could man or supervise our inmates anymore when, when it came to us that we could no longer send 10 inmates to Cabarrus County?
No, we're still sending 12. I mean,
12,
up
I'm
to
sorry.
12. I think
Okay.
up to 10 or 12.
So I'm trying to recall what that letter from them was. Was it that they didn't have staff that could do it, or they were having hiring issues, or what was the situation?
So my recollection is that was related to our request to try to send a block or more of inmates, which is roughly 45 to 50 inmates. And at that point in time, and Sheriff can correct me, they did not have the staffing level
They
to
don't have
take
the
on
staff.
that
They didn't have the
additional
staff.
45. And they had concerns about going out and trying to hire when really there wasn't any kind of commitment for that. And that was my recollection of the concern that they had.
I think you're right. That's not got anything to do with the ones we're sending up there now. That's available now, and we've got inmates there now.
Okay, and we're still contracted for 12?
I mean, is it 10? 10, I believe. 10.
Okay, it is 10, okay. So that is still happening?
Yes.
It was just the request to send a block?
That's correct.
That's right.
Okay.
We were trying to do the renovations for the locks and the painting and the
Mhm.
other things, and we can't do that in the facility without moving those inmates out.
Okay.
I think they would supply a supervisor, but we was gonna have to send our officers up there, back and forth, inmates, transport, all the things that go with it.
Okay.
No, you can't do that.
I think you said the key there would have to be a longer-term commitment. We just don't need the space until we get our fixes made, and then we're coming on home. It's going to be until we have a long-term answer ready to go online. And plus, for Cabarrus County, this might be employee pool for you. You might find some star detention officers, you turn into sergeants, get them out on patrol, what have you.
We just lost 3 to them. 3 patrol officers.
Can we contract them back?
I wish we could. 3 experienced road officers.
For your opinion, if you feel it is worth exploring, if you don't, I certainly understand this is
It's
your.
not gonna hurt us to call, it ain't gonna hurt me to call Sheriff Shaw. I'll be glad to do that.
If you think it's worth your while.
I don't know whether it is or not, to be honest with you.
You don't know till you ask, right?
But I don't have a problem calling him. I talk to him all the time, but I hadn't talked to him recently, but glad to do that. We're 18 down now, by the way.
Is that 18 detention officers?
No, that's road officers and detention officers.
18 total?
Mm-hmm.
Do you know the split? How many roads versus how many detention officers?
I didn't ask that. I just asked how many we had down, because I knew somebody's gonna ask tonight.
And when you say down, you mean vacancies?
Vacancies.
So what's the hiring pool for, I mean, what's the time frame to being able to fill 5, 10, 15?
Well, you might wanna wait till you get through this next one on there.
Okay,
We're sort of shut down now.
okay. Okay, thank you, Sheriff Cavan.
All right.
Yes, Commissioner Helms.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Sheriff, I'm sorry to bring you back. I just didn't want you to get too far, just in case you want to chime in on what I'm going to ask. So, listen, I commend Commissioner Size for trying to think of creative solutions. My only concern is that, yeah, I wonder if this is like long-term cost for a short-term solution, you know, if we are able to work something out, because, and listen, maybe I'm wrong, but, and you can probably speak to this better than anybody, but, you know, if you bring in, like, let's say the Cabarrus had to hire, you know, detention officers to, you know, cover the inmates that we're sending their way, I wouldn't imagine that you would make a hire on like a temporary type basis.
No, you won't.
You know, or even like a 2-year basis. I would imagine that it takes significant training there for COs and you know, just deputies in general. But I would think that that's a big initial investment that, of course, our county would probably have to cover. But I just don't know if, you know, if they would be, and it never hurts to ask, I understand that, but.
I don't mind.
But I would, if I was in their situation, I think I would have considerable reservation in taking on that staff only to potentially let them go, you know, a year down the road, so.
Well, I totally agree with what you're saying, and I think the key, the best hook for this, for Cabarrus, is it's not a short-term deal. Because we're already seeing here, if we started tomorrow to build our own facility, we're looking at 4 to 5 years. So we got to have these people somewhere for 4 to 5 years. So it's not a 1-year commitment. It is a significant multi-year commitment. So I wouldn't do it for a year either. I mean, I wouldn't, if I was going in to be hired, I wouldn't do it for, knowing it was only going to be for a year. I'd look for a real job of long-term. I'd come down here to Union County, of course.
That's right.
But, you know, and that's all part of it. Okay, how long would a commitment have to be to make it worth your while?
You know, each individual would have to decide that.
Yeah.
Thank you. We're going to end that one, and we're going to move on to the next business item, 25-297, the budget amendment for the Union County Sheriff's Office. I want to recognize County Manager Brian Matthews for this item.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. So this item, the board had asked previously for some additional information. This is related to a number of issues related to salaries, overtime pay, payouts for individuals who have left employment, whether they're retired or whatever, as well as incentive payments. And so it's not just an overtime issue. I want to make that clear. I think that there may have been a misunderstanding previously that this was all intertwined around overtime, and that's not really the case. There are a number of items where the sheriff's office has no control over, and it's not necessarily budgeted within their budget. One of those is the item where we do the payouts for those employees that are leaving employment. The last few years, that number has continued to grow significantly, and this fiscal year, it's going to be over $300,000. That was not budgeted in the sheriff's budget. What is not also budgeted in the sheriff's budget are incentive payments that we pay for our deputies and our employees with sheriff's office that, they get to a certain point where they're a master deputy or whatever the category is, they get some additional incentive bonus for that. Those were not budgeted within the sheriff's budget. That's $50,000, $60,000. And then there's also the cost of the realized cost of our holiday pay. While it was the right thing to do to certainly cover that holiday pay for our employees, the real cost of that is starting to come to roost. We made an estimate, but our estimates were low, and so we're seeing that cost higher than what we anticipated. That was not budgeted for necessarily in the sheriff's budget, that additional cost. Another thing that was not budgeted for is the sheriff's overtime budget. While it has grown as far as usage goes, the amount that we allocate for it has not grown in the last 5 years, and the cost of a per hour or the wage has not been factored into that. So while it stayed roughly around $400,000 over the last few years, the cost of paying for an hour and a half overtime is greater than what it was 4 years ago. So those are all things kind of combined led to where we are today, which we have a deficit in the sheriff's budget that covers salaries, benefits, and what the sheriff was talking about is he's on a freeze right now. He can't hire anyone until we make the board makes a decision to put some funds back into his account. So what you have before you are sort of two items. One is a ratification of a decision you already made to add $150,000 back to the budget for the sheriff's office. After looking at that, we felt that it just needed to be officially ratified because the language was a little wonky when we did it last time because it was on the fly. And then you have an additional budget amendment in CPO for $636,267, which will make up the difference and we believe carry the sheriff's office until the end of the fiscal year. So you add that 150 plus the 636,267, and you get a total of $786,267. We anticipate that will be enough to cover the sheriff's office until the upcoming fiscal year, end of the fiscal year. Knowing what we know now, we are going to factor into the budget those items that previously were not put in the sheriff's budget. Because again, that was not any of his doing. So we're going to put that stuff in his budget so that we can, number one, track it. Number two, it's there. We know it's there, and we can plan for it, and we can adapt for it. But I'm happy to answer any questions you might have. That is the action that's in front of the board at this point.
Commissioner Sides.
Where's the money coming from in capital? What are we not doing in order to transfer these funds?
Their repair and renovation budgets that are appropriated.
Can you come up to that? Sorry, Beverly.
So if you recall, in the capital budgeting process, the buckets that Chris refers to, this is the sheriff's office portion of the repair and renovation buckets that has been appropriated for the past couple years annually to pull from those pools for any repair and renovations they may need at their facilities.
So it may not be a specific project.
Right.
It may be just a pool of funds that are available. Now, I'm not saying there isn't a specific project that might get put delayed, but it's not necessarily a specific project.
Well, let's hope that project doesn't happen in an emergency basis. I got to say, I got two issues with this, not this specifically, but the bigger picture. First of all, I'm concerned that a $900,000 hole in a budget shows up the first meeting in May on a consent agenda, why hasn't this trend been tracked along the year? Why didn't we know about this at $500,000? Why didn't we know about it at $250,000? And all of a sudden, I got to tell you, at this time of the year, at the end of the fiscal year, I expect to be hip deep in new budget. I'm going to need some hand-holding. This is my first time around. And coming around and filling holes in the current fiscal year, just in my mind, is not responsible. Now, we should, if you're telling me we didn't see this coming, I have a hard time with that, because you can see trends. It doesn't just pop up overnight. Issue number 2, and this is also a budget issue moving forward, we have got to address this retention issue. We can't train these good people, get them out on the street, and then they get stolen by somebody else because we're not at market rate on paying these people. And we got to start all over again. We can't afford to have holes in our public safety personnel. I mean, I don't have to tell you all what's going on around here. We have gangs going through, you got fentanyl being sold, we keeping our schools safe. We cannot afford to let up at all on the valuable staff that we have here to keep us safe. So that's got to be addressed, and I mean in this budget. And if we have, I'm talking about if we've got to pay more, we got to figure some other angle. We need to do it and do it now, because this is a personnel drain that we cannot afford. As the sheriff said, these folks don't grow on trees. They've got to be trained, they've got to be experienced, they've got to be equipped, and we can't afford to keep losing them. And as far as I'm concerned, I'll speak for myself, but public safety is the #1 priority for me. And whatever we got to do, we need to do it. And if that means coming off, compensation needs to be enhanced, bonuses, you all tell me what'll work, what you want to do. But it needs to be done. This needs to be addressed. We cannot afford to keep losing this valuable personnel.
Commissioner Helms.
Beverly, you said this money's the close to $800,000 is coming out of the sheriff's office bucket. How much is remaining in the sheriff's office bucket, if you will?
I'm sorry, I don't have that data with me tonight, but we can provide it for you at a later time. Please. Yes.
Commissioner Helms?
Thank you, Madam Chair. So look, I share some of Commissioner Sy's concerns, and I think that's one of the reasons why, I probably got the motion a little, wonky the last time we discussed this, but I do think that there's obviously a need to be more proactive rather than being reactive. And I was pleased to see that the staff is developing some strategies there to make sure that we are properly planning, for these types of things in the future. So I want to be clear, with everyone out there that we are trying to right that ship and be proactive with our budgeting for things like this, so that we don't have this same situation occur. I mean, obviously, the county doesn't have an endless supply of fund balance. We don't have an endless supply of, buckets of money there for capital needs that we can use for these things. So I think that, proper planning, proper budgeting is certainly in order, and that's the best practice. It really is. We need to know, what we're up against so that we can better plan in the future. So I just want to say, although this has been a little eye-opening, for us as board members, I do want to at least commend staff for trying to right that ship and being proactive for the next fiscal year.
Okay, I just want to verify with Jason K., is this action written the way you want it given? Because that's all I've got to go with.
My understanding is that this is the recommended action that is being requested, and if this is the goal that they intend to accomplish, it is written to accomplish that goal.
Okay, let me know if I miss anything. I want to make a motion to approve capital project ordinances 347D and 367C, And secondly, to approve budget amendment number 34. Okay. See a lot of heads nodding, so any questions? Okay, all those in favor, say aye. Aye. Very good. Next on the agenda is item 25-306, county-funded lobbyist discussion. As this item was requested by Commissioner Sides, I want to recognize him now for this item.
I'll make this even quicker. I'll make a motion that we forget about having a lobbyist and save the 60 grand.
Are there any questions, comments, discussion about whether we have someone in Raleigh to keep us updated or not?
If I could just provide a little context for where the RFP is, it closes tomorrow. And so far, we have had 3 firms submit. We do not know specifically who yet. We won't know until everyone is able to submit. But you will have that information tomorrow. So obviously, Commissioner Sides has recommended not going forward with that. If you do want to go forward with that, you just need to think about how you want to try to evaluate those. We can submit those to the whole board. The board could appoint a couple people to review those and bring back recommendations. But that process does close tomorrow if you did want to continue on with it.
Oh, I'm sorry. Commissioner Sides, would you like to table that until we can see who did respond and?
Frankly, no, but I'll go to the pleasure of the group. We communicate regularly with our legislative delegation. I think that's all we need. Unless staff can tell me something that a lobbyist has done to our benefit in the past, I say forget it and save them the trip.
Commissioner Helms.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Listen, for my opinion, I think that we've already kind of gotten knee deep into a process there where we're looking at lobbyists that may be able to help us in Raleigh, and Lord knows, I mean, we've seen a lot of things coming from Raleigh, especially here lately. So I don't know if I'm in favor or not, to be honest with you, Commissioner Sides, and I say that simply because I don't know what I don't know, and we haven't seen the information from the folks that have given us at least something back with our request for proposals and RFQs. So I would prefer to at least see what it is that we're working with there, with what we're getting back from that process before we make any decisions. And, we may look at it and we may say, we don't really like these options. We want to do something different, in which case then I think, what Commissioner Sides is proposing may certainly be in order. But until I see what we're getting back, I'm not ready to table the entire process.
You want to look at what paperwork presentation they submit or in-person presentations? Because if you're talking about in-person presentations from lobbyists, I think I'd rather go have a root canal without anesthesia.
Through the chair, Commissioner Sides, I'm not saying that I disagree with you, but what I am saying though is that it's becoming increasingly more important, and we've seen this with HB 765. We've seen this with SB 382 beforehand. We're seeing it with SB 688. Where local government is consistently under attack. And so, although I may not be the fondest for, consultants and lobbyists, I do recognize that we have a significant need for any assistance that we can get with the state legislature.
Does our county commission association not employ those kind of resources? Of course, we might have to pay a little extra to actually get a lobbyist, but don't they advocate for counties? I mean, that's kind of what your association's for, right?
We do, and we get, we've been getting emails from the North Carolina Association of County Commissioners, and they have been actively, for example, opposing 765. But I didn't mean to cut off County Manager, if you want to speak real quick.
I was only going to say that whether you want a lobbyist or not, the county association is really concerned with North Carolina goals and not necessarily individual county goals. And I'll give you a classic example. When we wanted to have some legislation changed for us related to, our, how we were dealing with system development fees, which weren't system development fees at the time, we got special legislation for us for some of that stuff. So that wasn't North Carolina, and the county association isn't going to help you with that. That's not their role. Even if you pay them, they're not going to do it because that's not their role. Their role is as a state as a whole. So whether you want one or not, the benefit of having a lobbyist is that they can focus on your individual county needs.
And I just want to speak real quick. What I remember from a few months ago is we were not getting weekly updates from our lobbyist, but our staff was getting weekly updates that we were unaware of, what they were seeing and hearing in Raleigh, and our staff was aware of that. And we didn't know that they had it until we asked or brought this forward. I would like to turn it over to Jason Kay real quick.
Just in no way to truncate the debate here, Commissioner Sides may be just getting rolling with another dental analogy. But before we get to that point, just a reminder, there is a motion on the table, and it's within Commissioner Sides' discretion as to whether he wishes to withdraw that motion. I know there's a lot of discussion and debate at the moment. I just didn't want us to lose that.
I would yield to the group if you want to go through, I assume, reading at least initial presentations from these folks to determine if you actually want to haul them in here. Then, hey, if y'all need some extra reading, fine by me, and I'll withdraw the motion.
We'll withdraw and we'll proceed with the process and wait and see if there's going to be the 3 or more. It closes at 5 o'clock tomorrow?
11 a.m.
11 a.m. Okay. Let's table this, Commissioner Sides, and let's see what we get tomorrow. That'd
Sounds
be great. And I want to give staff an opportunity to look through those as well, and then bring it to us.
Sure.
Okay, thank you very much. Takes care of that. I will now recognize County Manager Brian Matthews.
I have no comments. Thank you.
Okay, I'm going to give Commissioner Sides a little break here, and we're going to start down here. Commissioner Baucom.
Thank you, Madam Chair, but I have no comment to say.
Okay. Commissioner Helms.
First of all, I'd like to thank everyone who reached out for calls, texts, prayers. During my daddy's passing. Excuse me. I apologize for not being here. But since I was not here, let me go ahead and also let everyone know that I was in support of the resolution that this board passed for HB 765. I think it is a grave injustice what our state is doing, and I'm very disappointed in our local representatives that think this is a good idea and how incredibly tone deaf they have been during this. So I want to make sure that's out there. I can't remember the date, but several months ago, we asked the state legislation for additional funding for additional judges for our court systems, and I'm going to ask staff if we could reach back out to them to see where we are in that process, because I think that will help tremendously, including with the discussion that we had tonight. And this week, we also had the Peace Officers Memorial, and thankfully, my family, who was in law enforcement, they have all retired, made it through every incident that they encountered. And I think I can collectively say for this board how grateful we are for our sheriff's office and our municipalities, police staff that they have. And just to let you know that this board very much appreciates and supports you.
Absolutely. And we're happy to have you back. It's not the same when you're not here, so, but we missed you, and, but your family, your sister, your brother, your mom, everyone's in our thoughts and prayers, okay? Okay, I do want to say that the ceremony we had last week, remembering our fallen law enforcement officers, it was extremely moving. I just continue to be so proud to live in Union County and have the men and women that wear the uniform that go out there every day to protect our county and our towns, and we had an amazing wife who lost her husband. It was very moving to have her there speaking at such a solemn moment, but I just want to thank the Union County Sheriff Office and Sheriff Kathy for remembering the ones that we have lost here in Union County, and for setting aside a day to remember. And I think it does not go unnoticed what you do for us every day. I wish we could do more. We need to do more. I do want to recognize, we had a really great announcement this past week. The superintendent of Union County Public Schools was named Superintendent of the Year for this region of North Carolina. I think this is his third time being nominated statewide for Superintendent of the Year, and we wish him the very best. And this will be my third time saying that he is the Superintendent of North Carolina. I did not realize until a week or two ago that he's been here 9 years. And so we brought Dr. Houlihan and his wife Shannon to Union County. He is a North Carolina native, and we were excited for him to leave Houston and bring his little children at the time to Union County, and he has truly served our 53 schools well, and our 42,000 students, and our 5,200 employees, and our amazing SRO program that we have developed, that where we were not one-to-one, and over his tenure, we are now, we have SROs in every school, and some of our schools have more than one. And they are beloved among these students. They are true heroes in those schools. But I do want to recognize Dr. Houlihan and say congratulations, and we hope that he can go to Raleigh and bring it home. But even if he doesn't, we will still call him Superintendent of the Year. So I will pass now over to Commissioner Helms.
Thank you, Madam Chair. First of all, I want to thank all of our speakers tonight. Obviously, that engagement is very important to us. It's always good to see some participation from the community. So thank you to everyone that spoke. A couple of things here. First of all, as a UCPS parent, I want to give a shout out to Mineral Springs Volunteer Fire Department. I happened to attend field day at a school within the system on Friday, and on top of it being extremely hot, it was also extremely fun to be out there with the kids. And I want to thank the fire department because, of course, they showed up as per usual and made everybody's day a lot more fun whenever they hosed down all the kids out there. Aside from that, just to give a brief update, we had a lot of discussion on this board last time we met on HB 765. I want to inform the public that HB 765 is still alive and well. So the latest revision was referred to the Finance Committee, and what that means is that it being in finance means that it is immune or exempt to crossover deadline rules. So that means that it can be revived at any time and can be heard and furthered by both chambers. Also of note here is that current revisions, the latest revision does include a 275,000 population requirement in regards to density. That's important because Union County sits right now as like the 8th largest. We're sitting somewhere around 260,000, but with recent approvals and construction going on in this county, we're going to be very, very close to that number very soon. So it also did not repeal SB 382, which included removing the local government's ability to downsell. So it also did not do that after we were told that it may. So I wanted to at least provide that update. I want to thank the people for everything that you've done in contacting those at the state level. It's really because of your efforts that we've gotten this far. So thank you to everyone that's made calls or sent emails. Aside from that, we've got Memorial Day coming up, and I just think I would like to at least recognize the sacrifice of those that that have paid that ultimate price for our freedom. And so, Memorial Day is not about having a day off. It's not about hot dogs and hamburgers, but it's recognizing that sacrifice that was made to protect what we hold dear. So again, thank you all. Have a good night.
Thank you. Commissioner Sides?
Commissioner Helms, I want to also, again, extend my condolences. Having lost both my parents some time ago, it is a hole that is never filled, but it is my sincere hope that there are plenty of good memories that at least help upon time of reflection. I also want to, again, state my determination that staff working with the Sheriff's Department determine what we have to do to curb this attrition rate. We cannot afford to lose these good people. Now, personally, I'd like to see options. The board, the full board, or the majority of the board may not support all of them from a financial standpoint, but I think it is imperative that they be presented, discussed, and studied, and for board action. And so I'm determined to see that happen to keep these good people. The other thing is I would also like to ask for the next agenda to include a presentation from the Government Efficiency Department. We have, did I name that correctly? All right. I wrote it down. You know what I mean, though, right? Yeah. I would like to have a presentation with their success stories, and in this day of Doge, I think the people of Union County would be very interested in knowing what local efforts we're doing to make sure their tax dollars are going as far as possible. So if we could set up a presentation for our June meeting, of course, all other items having place, I would appreciate it. And I wish you all a good evening.
Okay, I will accept a motion to adjourn. Okay, good night, everyone. Oh, well, yeah.